So let's get into our program. Let me first welcome Dan Ginsbarg with Iron Tiger Manufacturing. So folks, put your hands together for Dan.
Good morning, I'm Dan Ginsbarg. I don't really like the microphone, so can everybody hear me? I can project, so. Iron Tiger Manufacturing, we're a small manufacturing firm. We're on the northeast side of town. We're close to the airport. And I am president, owner, head dude in charge, etc., right? I'm gonna try to do this in 6 minutes. I purchased the assets of a kind of a failing company back in September of 2012. Our primary line is steel reel manufacturing. We'll show you what a steel reel is, but essentially from thread, all the way up to the stuff we make bridges out of, you can't just ball it up and put it on a truck. It has to be spooled. So we make the stuff, we make the cardboard boxes for that industry, if you will. Most of these are disposable. They're only used for transporting wire, rope, cable, arbors, we do some kind of climbing rope, etc. We have an additional line. We got into wood reel assembly, so we don't actually make the parts. Somebody approached us to actually assemble wood reels for General Cable. So we have a facility now that does that. We get the flanges and the parts and we put them together. And then we do fabricate other parts, and we are available to mass fabricate anything. We're not really a one-job shop. We really want to mass fabricate, and that's what we're kind of building out. We're looking for other products, and I'll show you an example of one that we've been doing recently. Future stuff, we make, and I'll show you some reels here in a second. We make large reels. As long as they can get out the door, we'll make it. But we want to actually get into the even larger, the 13 feet and bigger reels. There's not a lot of these made in the United States. Most of them are made in Europe or Mexico. So we're trying to find customers that are willing to work with us to help us develop that line. There's a lot of logistics issues to that to make a difference, but it would be something unique, and we know that there's a lot less competition than it is for the smaller products. And we're interested in the other thing that there's a trend right now. Wood is tough, and I've learned now that we're doing this wood reel assembly, it's very difficult to get rid of wood. There's the green aspect. It's technically renewable, but it's really not. It's very wasteful and it harms the environment, where steel can be melted down. So we've worked with customers now to try to find alternatives where you could get a cheap steel alternative, and I'll show you an example of that. And then we're looking for new product lines. All right, so what is a steel reel? That's a steel reel. All right, we make these. That's obviously one of the larger reels we make. First question we always get when we see something like that is, how do you move that? This one actually comes apart, so it's a product that can be put together at the final destination. Sometimes they go out in one piece, sometimes they go out in parts. We also make cute little ones, all right? So we'll make all different sizes, all right? This is how a reel starts. We manufacture 98% of the stuff we make. We make all the parts. We've started to outsource some of that stuff to kind of speed up our production, but for the most part, it comes in as flat, sheet, tubes, I-beam, etc. Then we roll it, we cut it, we shape it, whatever is required to make the parts for the reel. And then there is basically 3 assembly functions. We make the flange, so that's what we would call our intermediate assembly. So we take some of the parts, we put them together, and that's the wheel, the flange, the outside of the reel. Then we stand the reel, and this is where an example of we're actually standing a fairly large reel. We'll make a drum at this point. We'll put the parts roughly together, stand it, and then it goes into final assembly, where everything else, all the other parts are put on, and that can be a very complex thing if there's a lot of stuff involved in that reel. Otherwise, it could be a very simple function if it's a very simple reel. Then into the paint booth. We paint the vast majority of our reels. Again, these are, if you would think of as a cardboard box. They're one-time use. They put rope, they put wire, they put something on it, it goes to its destination, and it winds up in the scrap yard or elsewhere. If it's a more complex paint job, right now we tend to contract that out, and some of our stuff actually goes into ovens, so we don't paint them at all. Then they go out on the truck. So here's an example of some of the different reels we've done. Another example of where, you know, we can get a fairly large order. We've begun to work, and this is an example, this is like the first stage of how we're starting to work at these things to replace wood. So this is a particular case where we can get 28 reels on a flatbed, where historically you probably, if you would have used the reels that had the crumpling, the corrugated pattern, you can't stack them. So you might be able to get 13 or 14 reels on there. We were able to get 28. So it basically reduces the cost for that customer's just the shipping in half. This is a reel that we designed to try to replace wood. And again, to try to get the 6 minutes to go through the whole thing, but the customer pretty much had a problem. They were shipping to Chile. The product was basically on wood. It was going out in sea containers, and it was winding up at the final destination as a bunch of wood on the floor with a bunch of rope. They were not, to send the weight they needed to, they couldn't do it this way. So they needed a reel that they could substitute for wood, but they also had to manage the cost. So they wanted a returnable reel. So we designed this reel for them. It comes apart completely. It's so if they lose a stave, if the thing gets damaged, it can come back. They can ship an entire sea container full now, where they couldn't even get them full in the past, and they can send 100 of these back at a time. We're doing about 100 to 150 of these a month now. So it's starting to, and I did a show 2 weeks ago. I did a trade show, and there's a lot of interest in this. So it appears to be an uptrend of trying to replace, from both environmentally as well as logistically replace wood with steel. Other examples of steel reels, this one's kind of an interesting one. It doesn't have a drum. Believe it or not, that's probably one of the most difficult reels we ever made because it didn't have a drum. So it wasn't all warped and out of place. This is one where the wire actually goes in 2 different directions. So that's one continuous piece of rope, but it can be brought out for a certain part in this direction, and then the remainder can be taken out in the other direction. This one we're particularly proud of. We're the only manufacturing firm that makes reels in the country that's certified to make that reel. With the third one they came to, it came with a 52-page manual, believe it or not. 52-page manual how to make a reel. It goes to a Norwegian company, and they sent an inspector 3 times from Norway during the production process. It was a very serious vetting process, and so we are now certified to make this reel. This is just some examples of a little bit more technical stuff that can go on a reel. This is our wood operation. It's a much simpler operation. Essentially, we get shipped the flanges and the staves, and it's just mass production. I mean, we were doing about 2,000 of these a month in September. We're doing 9,000 pieces last month. So it's just a lot of throughput. This is called a stem pack. This is something new for us. Again, realistically, anybody can make any of these things. Any decent fab shop can make anything we make. Our first order of these were for 50 of these, and we had basically about a week to 2 weeks to get them all done. This required, a lot of different techniques and things that we hadn't done before. So this is now a new product line for us. We're making about 10 to 15 of these a month now. And that's what we're kind of encouraging, is if we can find somebody that wants to do, I'm done, basically. I think literally I'm done. If anybody is interested in having anything mass produced, I think that's what we're interested in. Right now, we've got all we can handle. Things have changed pretty dramatically since the start of the year, but we will again get to critical mass, and we have the capacity to add to it. So that's really what we want to do, is be a manufacturing firm. We just started small and we're growing. So that's Iron Tiger. So what are your questions?
Do you do any government contracting?
Currently, we do not have any government contracts. What we wind up doing is we sell to the end customer. So typically, the government wouldn't come and ask. I mean, it's theoretically possible. In fact, some of these larger reels, I think they do go on naval vessels and things like that. But most of the government contracts reside with our customer, and then we supply to them. So we do get requirements that we have to fulfill that would be commensurate with a government contract. But
what's your background and how did you end up in today?
All right, so, thanks, Roy. I have a finance background. I ran a hedge fund for about 20 years, and I woke up one day and decided I wanted to make stuff. So that's basically what happened. I mean, so I don't know what I was thinking, but 5 years ago I set off to do this. And but no, seriously, I've got the educational background. I was in the military, and I studied companies for 20 years, believing I could do a better job. So that's how I got here. Oh, and how I physically got here. We have two very large wire producing mills here in Sedalia. We have Warco and we have General Cable. So to have a mill or have a production facility for those places is a good base of operations. It's a good place to operate from. There's a history of making reels in this area, for the people who don't know that. We actually sell as far as England. We have a customer in England that we sell to, which seems rather crazy, but there is a market, I believe, for these if we can continue to adapt and grow, because I think we're taking on some pretty big firms, but your Sunoco's, some of these other companies, they're not real customer friendly. They do a lot of stuff, whereas this is what we do and we do it well, and so I think that makes a difference. So, but I had, to confess, I didn't know the difference between I-beam and channel when I started this, so it's been a learning curve. So,
Talk about your top 1 or 2 business risks and how you manage that risk.
all right, so that's where my background actually comes in well, because I managed risk for quite a while. So that's how I actually see the world. I see it in terms of risk. There are a lot, obviously anybody who runs a business knows there's an enormous amount of different risks. And the risks to a manufacturing firm are unique because there are things that I would have never ever seen in my previous life that I see every day. If I had to quote the top one, it has to be personnel. And it has to be personnel for several reasons. As a small firm, you have some unique problems that you wouldn't find in a large firm. You might have 8 people, even if you're spread out at different locations, you might have 8 people that have a particular skill set. I can probably use maybe 1 or 2. And so if one of them disappears or 2 of them disappears, you can have a critical problem. And so being able to back everybody up and have multiple training so that any one point in time you can continue to meet the mission that you have to for that day can become very complex. Recruiting right now is probably, and it's not just mine, and I know other people in here, recruiting right now is the toughest thing I have. I can adapt, I can find another steel vendor, I can, thank goodness, I mean, managing customers is something that we kind of know how to do and how to interact, and I think we're so service oriented, I think it kind of helps to manage that risk. But every day I come in, I don't know if they're going to be there. I don't know, and we're an assembly line, so when something's missing or somebody's not there, it can be meaningful. So personnel risk, I don't want to go too much, but I'd be glad to expand on any more, but personnel risk is without a doubt. And that also includes injury protection. Believe it or not, most people do not have a self-preservation instinct. It absolutely, it boggles my mind, but having come from a military background, I mean, managing risk and safety is something that's been ingrained. So we do our best. Fortunately, knock on whatever, we haven't had any real incidents, in years. So, and we want to keep it that way. But so personnel, without a doubt, training, recruiting, making sure they're there, and anybody under, for any of you who hire anybody under 23, there's an additional set of things that go with having anybody under 23. So anyway.
How are you doing your marketing now, and how did you do it when you started up?
All right, so when I stumbled into this, basically I was under the impression that there was a product mix, that there was I could probably give an entire presentation on, fortunately because I'd done several deals before this, I protected myself, but getting in as a small business person and doing acquisitions, I could probably do a presentation on that with what I learned going through my experience. So we actually had one customer, and that customer was on the verge of leaving. So the initial thing was to focus on that customer, develop that relationship, and build that out, and then begin to seek out other people who are buyers of reels. And some of it came from word of mouth. Some of it came from us just cold calling people until we got people to give us a chance. The most recent thing that I've done, which I've never done before, is we had a booth. The Wire Group actually, there's an international and a national trade show for anybody that makes wire, which buying reels is a part of that. It's kind of a mundane all the way down at the bottom, but it is a part of it. And so we did a booth for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and I was stunned. I thought I was going to have a week to catch up on all the stuff I hadn't been able to catch up with, and frankly, I don't know if I would have done it given where business is now, because we've just been overwhelmed since the start of the year. I can't follow up fast enough. I mean, quantify it, we would probably see 1 or 2 requests for a quote, mostly from our current customers a week. I got 15 in the last week, and I can't keep up. I mean, so it's good problem to have, everybody says, but to tell you the truth, it's running me ragged. But it will be good at some point. So that's kind of the best way at this point to market. Now, as far as looking for new products, I've tried a lot of different things, and I think the reality probably will be is when we finally get to that point where we're stabilized again, probably an acquisition or something like that, because it's very, very difficult. Walmart has this great new program where supposedly if you make it here, they got billions of dollars, they want to buy it here, and then you go and you talk to them and, well, let's see, how many years have you made this thing? And you know, they're not going to buy reels. They might buy fireplaces or grates or things like that we could fab, but then you have to have had years and years. I mean, so it doesn't make any sense. If you have an existing product line, they'll work with you. But if you don't have an existing product, they won't start a new one, which seems to me kind of silly, because if we're not making it here, how are we going to make it here if they don't do that? So anyway, so that's kind of, did that? Okay.
So your product is 100% American made?
100%. And even the steel at this point is 100%. So we try to be, in fact, we've tried to do that for the last couple of years anyway, because that's kind of why I did this. I kind of believe that you could do it here. Now I think there's an advantage to doing that. So I think that's, it's a good thing that we make it all here.
I know that I applied for a grant and I got one to build this obstacle course, and then I've got to get, like, for everything that we build, we got to get 3 bids on it. But then it's got to be 100% American made, or we have to get a waiver. So that's kind of nice that you can make iron products. Hey, a while ago you said, oh, you can take the stuff off either direction, and it just kind of made me think about toilet paper, how you could unroll it either way. But, like, is that like a big deal to be able to unroll your wire?
Yeah, well, typically, I mean, think about just to simplify, just a spool of thread. Think about being able to take thread from 2 different directions.
Oh, at the same time?
At the same time.
Oh, okay, I missed that at the same time part.
It's fairly easy. I mean, we do sell some where there's dividers, and we can have, like, somebody will have like 3 different types of tubing or something on there, so they'll roll them up and they'll separate them out. That's a fairly easy to be able to actually have a machine load a reel where the rope's going to actually be coming from 2 different directions required a little bit of an engineering. So, and the reason for showing that is that just we want to work with our customers, and if they have an issue, we'll focus on it until we help them solve that problem. And a Sunoco or some of these bigger companies out there, they just don't do that. So that's kind of how we exist. So
It was just out of my knowledge base. I didn't understand.
So I think you're in the old ABM building,
I am in the old ABM building.
and then looks like you're pretty full. Do you have any plans for expansion as far as under roof?
So the building, I actually acquired the building a year ago, and that's been a bit of a journey in and of itself. Again, fortunately for me, I have enough of a background and the capacity to learn, and I can reach out to people and learn, but every time I go through these things, it's a learning curve. We've reorganized and become much more efficient. We've coming out of a pretty bad recession, so the last 2 years have been really, really really tough for us. So that's given us an opportunity instead of just, you know, twiddling our thumbs or crying about it. We really spent a lot of time developing other products and jigs and all the different things so that we can maximize where we're at. So at our peak in 2014, we had 42 people. We got down to 11. And so we're now back, we're trying to get to 30, I think, as quickly as we can. And we've actually added some new to different types of positions. At that time, the most we could put in there was 17, what I would call of the more skilled, the intermediate and final assembly. We now can do 26 based on how we've redone it, so we can make a little bit more use. But the truth is, if things are good, we're going to outgrow it. The immediate thing is there's footings for a building in between that burned down. If we got into this large real building, we really need a facility with larger ceilings and bigger doors. So that would be my first choice. There is additional land there that we could expand on. So, you know, I've really been trying to grow this internally, not to acquire an enormous amount of debt so we can survive a 2-year downturn, things like that. But yeah, the wood operation right now is bursting at the seams. We don't have room for everything we should probably have at this point. So.
You basically answered what I was going to ask in reference to your personnel with your new found just demand. And is there, is the employee starting to come a little bit more around, or is it a matter of product that?
What we're trying now is something that we've never done in the past. So we have to adapt. I mean, we're not just going to throw up our hands and say we can't do this. We've got to figure out how to do this. So if we cannot hire skilled people or retain skilled people, because all people now are under pressure because every business around here is growing, so we're all fighting over the same people. And so the way we're trying now is we're taking our skilled sets and we're separating them out. So we're saying this is the stuff that takes a lot of training, it takes a lot of skill to be able to do it. So these are our welders that we know we can count on all the time and really have that level of expertise. They have tasks that they have to do because I typically, especially when you're in the final assembly, they're required to complete the reel. What we're trying is bringing in lower qualified, less qualified people that we normally wouldn't have hired for those positions. We're bringing them in with the idea that we're going to offload those less complex tasks. If this is successful, we can probably increase our production by about 40%. And if they don't decide to show up after a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we haven't taken all this time to train and because every time we do that, it takes our supervisors, it takes all this, and to get to be able to do what we do, believe it or not, it takes a lot of expertise. There's a lot. We basically developed a lot of procedures from start to finish on how all parts should be made, how they fit together, and how that. Otherwise, we can't make 50, 60 reels in a week. It's just not possible. So basically, we can't just take somebody in and spend a month, 2 months, and then lose them. So this is what we're trying. We'll see how it works. So far, it's only been like a little over a week, but I gotta look at 10 people to 20 people to hire 5 to get 2 that maybe want to stay, and that's the process right now. It's just, I see people nodding. It's crazy, but that's the process now. You can explain that to your customers. They're facing the same things. They don't care. They need the reels. So we got to figure out. And overtime is the worst possible thing. Overtime. I don't know how these companies that do it all the time. I don't know how they do it because there's no doubt in my mind you do get incremental production, but you don't. If you work an extra day, we work 410s. Best productivity enhancement I ever did was go to 4 10-hour shifts. Everybody told me, because again, I try to plug in and talk to other people and see what works and things. I heard from multiple sources, 4 10-hour days is much better than 5 8-hour days. One of these reels that we make a lot of takes roughly 5 6 hours to make. If you drag your feet at the beginning of the day, you don't get up to full speed before every break, and you drag yourself at the end of the day, you can produce 1 of these a day. But if you're there for 10 hours, you can't drag it out. And literally production went up by almost 50% by doing that. We did it predominantly just because of the weather. So we start at 4 a.m. and we work till 3, but that was a huge productivity enhancement. So getting to overtime, if we add an additional day, that would be a 25% increase. We do not get a 25% increase in production, and if we do that too many times, you start to see it really fall off over time. So overtime is not really good in this because it's a hard day. It's a hard 10-hour day. So you really got to get the people. You have to create the jobs and in order to do the demand. So.
John, did you have a question?
Yeah, it seems like this is a product that needs to be manufactured very close to where it gets consumed, but yet you say you have a customer in England. So what proportion of your sales are not what I would consider local, like Missouri or West or Eastern Kansas?
So that's a very good, that's a good question. I mean, because that changes. That's really changed a lot since the beginning of the year. I have no idea why this company in England buys these reels. I guarantee you, the last ones we sent, they spent a multiple on shipping that they did versus the reels themselves. They clearly don't have access to these reels, and I think it had something to do with Brexit. I don't know for a fact, but I think that there's something going on there that is unusual. But again, there's been this huge reliance on wood. And even though there are other steel reel manufacturers, there are not a lot of them. More than I would like, to be quite honest. But there are a lot of them. I would say if you were asking me to look forward over the next 6 months, I would say because the customers that we deal with tend to they have multiple locations. So we'll send reels to somebody here locally maybe that might actually send them further out because trucks go back and forth. But it's probably 40%, 50% would be what I would consider close. But I mean, we send a lot of stuff to Pennsylvania. We send a lot of stuff down to Texas. I mean, it's really hard to say because the reels have to wind up where the stuff actually goes. And believe it or not, I mean, Sedalia is in a great place because you can go north, south, east, and west pretty effectively. It's a 2-day drive to Pennsylvania, so you would think somebody up northeast could service these guys better than we can, but they don't. They come to us. So I'm too cheap. I don't know exactly what but at this point we're not. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to grow our market base, and especially given what the last 2 years have been. But I sort of kind of feel like we put a lot of gasoline on the ground, throwing matches, and all of a sudden it all caught. So now we're a little, I don't know. So.
Dan, I have the last question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So what can we, outside of buying your products, what can we as a community do for you?
Wow, that's another really great question. Not that all questions are great, but these are ones I have to actually think of an answer. So the biggest problem we had, and we talked about it briefly, is personnel. I mean, I think, and that's not just a risk for me, it's got to be a risk for everybody. I guess I was stunned at how hard it's been to ramp up. I always assumed that when business turned, I'm using an employment service, and I just assumed there would be a steady flow of people that we could take a look at, and there's not. It's been way more difficult. So I don't know how you do that, but I would say to increase the potential employment pool is when you're talking about bringing more businesses and doing stuff. Right now we're at capacity here, so I think you've got to find some way to. And I don't know how many people actually commute. I've got guys that come from Coal Camp, from places I don't even know because I'm kind of a stranger in these parts. I mean, they come from pretty far south. So a lot of them drive 45 minutes to come to us. So to me, that's a risk because if they find something closer, that's a decent thing. That would be the one. Other than that, I mean, I think everybody here is actually pretty good. I mean, the one anecdotal thing I would share that just makes it really nice to work around here. Because I live in St. Louis. I come here, I live here during the week, and then I go home on the weekends. And because the plant needs to be here. When I first set this up, I had to get tax IDs and all those things. So I went down to this place in St. Louis on I think it was on Hanley. But first of all, it's all surrounded in barbed wire. I mean, so you got these high fences with barbed wire. You got to go in. You go all the way in the back. You go in, and there was nobody there. and they told me to sit down. And I sat down for like 30, 40 minutes until I finally like, what's going on? And then they finally got somebody who begrudgingly came out to talk to me, who then told me to go back and sit down. So then they came in again. Long story short, it took like 2 hours there. And I finally get up to the end, and they're like, well, you got to have cash. Well, I didn't have exact change. I had to actually leave, go to a bank, get change, and come back. And I can tell you, there were no banks anywhere as close to where this thing was, given the barbed wire fencing and all that. I come out here. It drives me a couple hours to get out here. I go into the place in here. Everybody is so nice. They're so friendly. They take care of you right away. You get done, and you're like, holy cow. I mean, this is just amazing. And I was in and out in like 10, 15 minutes. So I think a lot of the stuff around here really is, top notch. It's just the labor thing is serious. It's a serious problem. And I don't think I'm the only one. I don't know if there's I think there's others who are going to tell you the same thing. Especially if we're going to grow. To grow, we got to have people. So.
Thank you very much.